YouTube. I'm filming this in wake of both Tim Curry and Dolly Parton a day before him having passed away, and two tremendous talents who had and just have influenced my life so much. But as far as films go and movies and Tim Curry, I was sort of running through the gauntlet of films I had seen and how they had affected me. And I was reminded of just very early on something that I sometimes overlook, and I was thinking about Home Alone 2. And, Home Alone 2, if you're not as familiar with this film or if you haven't seen it in a long time, when Kevin is lost in New York and he's away from his family and he's really alone and he's kind of learning a lot about a big city. And when you're like me and you weren't from a city, you're from a small town, the villain that Tim Curry played was sort of this corporate suit, this disingenuous, duplicitous kind of evil, conniving man. And as a child, most of the villains that I was used to were monsters or cartoons. Like they weren't, Roadrunner stuff. Like they weren't real enemies. And I think even though that Tim Curry played something of a caricature there, something of a hyperbolic character, it still resonates with people. I mean, he puts so much effort into that character, like the part where he, runs into the fake Frank, in the bathroom, and then the conviction of just running into the stool. Like the movie and the performance in that movie is really kind of underrated. And I've defended Home Alone 2 on my channel before as someone who covers a lot of art films and that kind of stuff. But from a very early age, the point I'm getting at is that Tim Curry was just someone that just instantly clicked with me. And then years later, as I started to grow up a little bit and encounter new films, every summer I would go camping at this campground. And there was this guy who had a huge collection of videos, a bunch of VHSs. And that was the first time I was exposed to It by the Stephen King version. That's like the TV miniseries. And of course, Tim Curry was the clown in that, Pennywise the Clown. And that whole branch of horror ended up being something I was really into later on. And he's just so terrifying as that character. Again, a character that has a little bit more nuance that he gave to it than I think some actors might have. And that character really stuck with me. And so I read the novel years later as an adult and really enjoyed it, minus some of the stupid ending that I think Stephen King gave it. But Stephen King, and thinking about what Tim Curry did with that, I was actually very reticent even to watch the version that came out maybe 10 years ago, because I was just really like Tim Curry in that role. Even though these are both probably considered kind of uneven films, right? But then even later as an adult, I ran into another movie that I really like, okay? And I have recently, in May, my wife and we rewatched Breaking Bad, which is a tremendous show. And we also watched, and she'd only seen part of Better Call Saul, which I think is really good. And in Better Call Saul, one of the best characters in that was played by Michael McKean, who is, famous for Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap, really good in that film, but he was Chuck in Better Call Saul. And that particular series, just really, really enjoyed it. But Michael McKean was also in another film with Tim Curry that's a really good comedy that has no business being as good as it is, called Clue. And I have a steelbook of it. I love this steelbook. My wife and I watched this maybe a summer or two ago. It's been a little while since we've seen it. This film, for me, this film Clue, I had forgotten the level of effort that Tim Curry had to pull into being this butler. Because on the surface, this should be a silly movie. It should be, a movie that we forgot about almost as soon as it came out, because he's just playing this butler and they're playing this game of Clue is put to life, right, by this board game put to life by this film. But he just gave his all. His line delivery and trying to just regurgitate information of facts that occur in Clue while also being funny. So he's responsible for all the exposition in this film, really, and the comedic timing and the energy and the screen presence. It's a really tremendous performance, one of those really underrated comedic performances and a stacked cast. I mean, this is a huge cast in this film. I can't even remember offhand who all's in it, but yeah, there's young Michael McKean. I think Christopher Lloyd's even in here, as well as a few other actors. But Wadsworth, right, playing a not entirely different role than he did back in Home Alone 2. But I'll tell you, one of the best experiences beyond that I ever had at the movies. It was a really cool experience. That also I was thinking about when I was reflecting on Tim Curry. There was a little theater near me. It's just a small theater. It's got to have maybe less than 100 seats. Like it's not that big of a theater. And people told me you got to go see Rocky Horror Picture Show. They had a live showing of it where people brought the props and people did cosplays. And I'd never done that. I'd had no real concept of the film. And like, I go into this theater and I didn't realize they were going to be like, hey, have you ever seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show? I'm like, no. And I raise my hand. Well, apparently there's a whole initiation process that I won't get into here to spoil for you, but it involved me dancing around the theater like an idiot with some other people. And like, we're just watching this and people are just like yelling at the screen and this really interactive film. And then up comes, you got these two young people. They're lost in the middle of the night. It's this dark, stormy place. They go into this almost like Charles Laughton, like old dark house, James Whale, that film, very similar. And they go into this mansion or whatever, and they're met by one of the most bizarrely effective horror, comedy, musical, hybrid characters ever. Right up there with like stuff from The Wicker Man, played by Tim Curry. And he just like completely redefined what that genre can do, to the point that it came up in TV shows like Glee, and it's still this cultural icon that in this experience that in the theater, in the cinema, I still think people should probably have if they're into those kind of movies. And I was reflecting on just all of that, right? And that's not even everything. I've not even seen, I know he has, if YouTube tell me, I'm thinking he has the Treasure Island that's really popular, and I've not even seen that. His filmography and all of his accomplishments, like, sometimes I think it's really easy to overlook what an actor who did a lot of comedy can accomplish or has accomplished. But I just like, I look back and I think about this career, and it's so awesome to me. This is one of the top comedic talents I have personally watched on the screen. The fact that I can think about, Home Alone 2, that had John Hurd, Catherine O'Hara, that sort of iconic Macaulay Culkin character, Joe Pesci, like all these great actors. And then I can remember that. The fact that like he's just created this iconic Rocky Horror Picture Show character. And then it, right? Like the Pennywise and Clue, and just like a board game movie kind of like that. He just elevated the material, and so did some of the other wonderful actors in that film. And I was just thinking about all that today, and I wanted to sort of celebrate his life. It was that, like I said, if you're a country music fan or a music fan or just a fan of good people in general, the Dolly Parton, she passing away right before that was really a gut punch. But I think it's important. One of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because of film and because of these projects that people poured so much love and heart and soul into. We get to keep seeing Tim Curry movies, and that might sound like the most cliche, simple thing ever, but I think it's really important. And that's why I like talking about old movies or movies that maybe have not been looked at in a while. And maybe that's why my algorithm is full of people that are 60-year-old plus, because I just like talking about achievements that have lasted, legacies that will go on. And I do believe that a long time from now, people will still be talking about some of these films I just mentioned. I think no matter how technologically advanced we get, people will still relate to Kevin McAllister in Home Alone, and then Tim Curry being his silly self in Home Alone 2, even if you're not super into that film. I think, people in the LGBTQ plus community, I think, are always going to look at Tim Curry's wonderful character as an icon, and people in the horror movie community and the music in the musical theater community, I think people are always going to be looking at these works and all the ones I haven't mentioned, and that's why I wanted to throw it out there too, so that you all could tell me what Tim Curry performance stands out for you. What is your favorite? But those were just some that, in an organic way, I wanted to discuss that had influenced and impacted my life in a positive way. And so, yeah, let me know your thoughts. I would really appreciate that, and we'll see you next time.